The tube map is in London, just like Big Ben, the Tower of London, the London Eye. The tube map it's instantly recognisable to locals and tourists alike, known and loved and parodied all over the world. With a new version coming out every few months, some people are properly obsessed with the tube map, with vast collections, and can spot the subtlest of differences between different versions. Ugh, look at them. Massive bunch of nerds. But don't take this map for granted, and the London it's a map of might have looked very different as a result. So, what is the story? In the mid-19th century, when underground railway lines first started popping down all under London, the only maps of them available were the ones published by the private companies themselves, showing their own services in clear bold, and rival services, if they felt like it, in narrow, faint lines they didn't want you to notice. Waiting for the same passengers, they very often went out of their way to be uncooperative. This circular route was operated by two rival companies who hated each other. Metropolitan District Railway, just one stop, but you bought your ticket from the wrong booth, you had to go the long way round the circle. That's where this came from. For example, if you wanted to change trains at Bank Station, you had to change trains at Bank Station. London's underground railways could have been so much more useful. So many more passengers if they were all run together as a coordinated system. But it would take someone with a colossal bank account to make that happen. Fortunately for Londoners, in a colossal moustache, Charles's very American idea was to run a railway network, a group of lines stretching in all directions across the city, where with one ticket you could start your journey on one line and end it on another. So he set up URL for money he'd piled up. He went on an shopping spree, including 4 lines that hadn't even been finished yet. By November 1905, he was dead. With a very shrewd move of dying, he avoided having to pay back any of the huge debts he built up. But his dream of creating an underground network in London had come true. The UERL was a properly integrated system with common ticketing and a proper network needed a proper map. The first map that showed all the underground lines in London mapped on one map, including the ones UERL didn't own, that are familiar to us today.
Piccadilly line in yellow!
This complete map of the whole network was very useful. With all the Army and Navy and auxiliary stores, it was a messy clutter with too much information and looked like a plate of spaghetti. The problem was, the task of creating a map of the whole network that was both useful and easy to read was a notoriously difficult one. Lots of companies at this time published their own maps of London's network, each with their own approaches. The Wonderground map by Max Gill, simultaneously incredibly detailed and incredibly completely useless. By the early 20s, the London Underground had begun sprawling uncontrollably out in all directions into the Frank Pick. Pick was obsessed with the tube's corporate identity, the notion that the whole system should feel more togethery. It was Pick's idea for every station to have a roundel, the iconic logo with the red circle and blue line, and for every sign to use the same font with the perfectly round O's and the little diamonds for dots above the eyes, and to commission all those lovely posters that your middle-class friends have in their kitchens. Most importantly, Pick wanted Frank Stingemore. Nothing else. No roads, no landmarks, no nothing. Just a plain beige background. With easiness of reading at the top of Stingemore's priority list, to fit all the detail in, Stingemore took the naughty shortcut of not bothering to draw the distant suburbs to scale. For example, these stations on what we now call the Northern Line were matter. For passengers trying to get from station A to station B, this map still serves its purpose perfectly well. Unless you were driving the train, why do you need to know the exact length or exact bend units of each track? Come to think of it, even if you're driving the train, you don't really need to know that either, do you? Could still be useful even if the scale was distorted. And it was this concept that inspired another designer to do something even more radical. And his name was Frank Stingemore. Harry. Henry Charles Beck, known as Harry to his no friends, was a 29-year-old technical draftsman working at UERL. It was his job to draw up diagrams of the tube's signalling systems. And then it wasn't his job anymore. Harry must have really missed his old job, because after leaving the UERL, he spent his spare time working on an extremely nerdy work-related project. He nerdily imagined what it would look like if all the stations on the London Underground were represented connected like in a circuit diagram. B, to combine them all together. It was that scale could absolutely go itself. Harry drew the entire network using only straight lines that were vertical, horizontal, or at 45 degrees. Here's one of his rough drafts where he rubbed out lines and replaced them with straighter ones. When he finally finished, it looked like this, and it looked like this, and it looked like this. An elegant, colourful design, with the stations in central London spaced evenly apart and the suburban stations bunched evenly apart. No opportunity was missed for symmetry, equal spacing and parallelity. Galen, frankly mad it was. Absolutely go itself. Harry's so-called journey planner was not a map, it was a dumb map. But for the very specific job it was trying to do, a diagram was better than a map. By totally ignoring the concept of scale, he was able not only to fit all the stations in, but to make absolutely go it. It also gave the impression of a cohesive, comprehensive, coordinated, connected system. It also looked awesome. Harry was very pleased with himself. And Frank Pick is going to love this. And Frank Pick didn't love Harry's map at all. Pick refused to publish Beck's map on the grounds that it was inaccurate and that the public wouldn't understand it. Looked much further apart than they really were, which might make tourists crowd onto the tube for needless journeys in 19.19 seconds. And tried several times to persuade Frank Pick. Eventually Frank Pick gave in and agreed that if Harry Beck agreed to leave him alone, he'd a trial run. A small handful of copies were printed and sent to a small handful of stations. Small handful of copies were printed and sent to a small handful of stations. Small handful of copies were printed and sent to a small handful of stations.
Have saying a new design for an old map. We should welcome your comments.
To the surprise of Pick and the public seemed to have no trouble understanding Beck's concept. They blooming loved it. In 1933, officially replaced Frank Stinchmore's map as the standard. Harry Beck had done it. But little did he know, things were about to go very, very wrong for him.